Now, you could have gone a very dark route with this as well, right? You chose to become an ally and a partner to the company. From a remote click of a button, you could have killed millions of people.
Yeah.
Wow. That's pretty intense to think about.
But it's fixed.
But it's fixed. Pete Morgan, thanks for being on the podcast.
Thanks
Appreciate
for
it.
having me.
You are a world-renowned hacker, one of the best. In my eyes, the best, number one. What is the craziest thing that you've ever hacked?
Pacemaker, implantable cardio defibrillator. So the devices that hospitals and medical device manufacturers make to keep your heart in rhythm, the pacing for how the heart can work and or restarting the heart if it stops. Those devices run code. They are really advanced, but they're kind of built from a long scale from the 70s to the 80s to the 90s, 2000s, et cetera. So I found a way to break into one remotely via the radio frequency that it uses to communicate with the device that typically sits in your bedside. And that's how the doctors can kind of say, are you getting better? Are you getting worse? And I could actually reprogram that device to make it do kind of whatever I wanted. I could make it play the Mario Brothers theme song.
No, you can't.
Yeah.
You're kidding.
It has a speaker to alert you if there's a condition happening. So, and actually you can play a MIDI file. So yeah, I made it play this Mario Brothers theme song. But you can also reprogram it to do things like shock the heart. Now, I did some research, submitted it to the company, and then worked with them to make a fix. So that was no longer possible to do. But that was really fun because it was helping people kind of be safer in a way where these companies spend billions of dollars on research to extend human life and improve human life. And yes, mistakes happen that lead to security vulnerabilities that can be exploited by attackers, but kind of shoring those up and fixing them so they can get back to work, making more life-extending therapies was really kind of cool and fun to be a part of.
Amazing. So what you're saying is from a remote click of a button, you could have killed millions of people.
Yeah.
Wow. That's pretty intense to think about.
But it's fixed.
But it's fixed. Now, you could have gone a very dark route with this as well, right? You chose to become an ally and a partner to the company. I'm sure there was another end of this that you could have said, hey, FYI, I can go ahead and kill millions of people if you were an evil villain unless you give me $100 million or a bit, whatever. But you didn't do that, right?
No, that's that's kind of that. It is true. Those types of things happen. You can find issues in things, write exploits for them and sell them to people. There's an entire market for that. I think it'd be pretty tough to sell an attack like that.
Yeah.
Unless the party buying it is a pretty bad actor. And A, definitely don't want to be involved with that. And B, if you're ever caught doing that, like, I don't want to imagine the response that would happen.
Yeah.
Like, that's not,
straight to the to probably.
Yeah, I think so.
Let's talk about just generally this word hacker. Like, what does it mean to be a hacker? What sort of qualifications do you have to have if you want to consider yourself a hacker?
Yeah, there's kind of a couple different interpretations of it. One is just someone who hacks on something, like is interested in usually something involving a computer, taking it apart, figuring out how it works. And there's another connotation for like finding security issues, exploiting them, and doing something with that. Now, we kind of simplify this in some certain ways by calling something like a black hat attack, which is like you're actually trying to cause damage to something, financial, personal, something like that. Or white hat, which we're oversimplifying, but that's someone who like might be a consultant or work for a company trying to find these things legitimately before an attacker does. And that's been, the great majority, that's been all the work I've really done has been on the white hat side, being a consultant, running consulting companies, working with, really interesting organizations trying to preemptively attack their software as a bad guy so other bad guys can't, right? Like kind of.
So like Batman's the white hat and Bane is the black hat.
Yeah.
All right. Easy for the audience to understand.
Yeah. Perfect.
What would you consider to be hackable? Like, is basically anything that is electronic technically hackable?
With enough time and resources, yes. And I don't want to say it's simply just that like everything's easily hackable, but given enough time and money put into something, for the most part, yes. Anything mass produced. The best example is your iPhone. The amount of work they put in to secure this, it is hands down the most complicated and advanced security platform in mass production by a landslide. Like the next closest thing is miles away. It still gets hacked. There are still jailbreaks found in iOS, and I think the last time I looked, they were selling for about 2.2 million on the black market. I think right around there, 1.5 to 2.2. So if you found,
sorry, for what? For a jailbreaked iPhone?
No, to find the attack to compromise an iPhone and execute code.
Crazy.
You could sell that for a couple $1 million right now.
Holy
so
cow.
It happens, right? Like,
yeah,
it's a lot of money for people to go stare at a computer for a while and figure out a way. And even though Apple has tons of resources to put against fixing it, it's an arms race. So, most things in your life aren't probably going to be hacked around you simply because most people aren't really a target. But if you're for some reason hiding $10 billion in an electronic safe thinking that no one's going to get in, that's not a good idea.
Somebody's getting in.
Yeah.
Is all forms of hacking illegal, right? I mean, we talked about the white and the black hats. So obviously the white hats are sort of the superheroes, the good guys. The black hats are the villains, the bad guys. Is all of this stuff illegal technically, or are there forms of hacking that are perfectly okay?
There are perfectly okay forms. For instance, if you buy an iPhone and then you want to take it apart, it's completely legal. You own it. If you want to test hacking into Facebook or Google,
yeah,
and you do it online, and it's not under the bounds of a legally agreed upon thing, that is legal. So there are spots that are and are not, but they're pretty well known. A lot of companies like Facebook and Google and lots of others run what's called a bug bounty. So basically it says under these terms, you're allowed to test for security vulnerabilities. And if you find one, we'll pay you for it. But you can't go outside our bounds. Here's the playground. And you're free to do this type of work. There's usually a little bit more restrictions than that. But if they find something, and there's people that make millions of dollars a year doing this, they'll find bugs that they'll pay $100,000, $150,000, $200,000 for. It's not super common, but it happens.
These are expert level hackers that would be working on this stuff. So Facebook comes out with a bug bounty. I'm assuming depending on the magnitude of the bug will depend on how much money they're willing to pay, right? So if they have, let's say they have a big one and it's like $500,000, I would assume that's a relatively big one.
That's bigger than I think I've ever seen. Usually the top end is somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 to 200.
Okay.
But yeah.
So if they came out with one like that, $500,000, how many people do you think would be trying to like get the bag?
Hundreds of thousands.
What?
Absolutely. Yeah. So there's programs, one's called HackerOne, one's called BugCrowd, where they're platforms for setting up bug bounties. And like, we're actually working on setting up one for Phylum with BugCrowd. And they basically set up all the rules, and they have a bunch of people that are signed up on BugCrowd, and they can kind of go out to and say, hey, we have a new bounty for this company. We think you might be a fit, and kind of attract those people into doing the work on that. And you're kind of it's a crowdsourced security research model. Instead of just paying like a pen test company to come, do a 2-week or 4-week project or something.
Yeah, you're going to get as many
a ton of people
as are interested.
Might have some odd ideas that work. And it's just one of the avenues a lot of major companies now use to employ the best people they can get their hands on cost effectively.
Unbelievable. One company that I think about relatively often, and I think a lot of people have these conspiracy theories about Tesla, right? So Tesla's obviously got now millions of supercomputers driving around the streets, driving around the roads that happen to be sort of very dangerous machines if they're not treated the right way or potentially hacked into. So is it possible for the Tesla network of vehicles to get hacked into? And what would be like the worst case scenario of somebody being able to hack into, 1 million Teslas?
Is it possible? Yes, it's possible. I think it's extraordinarily unlikely. Basically, I think we would have seen it in the news already. I have some colleagues that worked on the Jeep hack in 2015. One of the guys was working the same team, and they did some really seminal, groundbreaking work on car hacking and kind of how it works. And since then, it's become a very attractive target. Tesla, of course, is like, they're kind of the Apple of cars.
Yeah.
They have a humongous fan base. There's a lot of people that love them, a lot of people that hate them. I would be shocked if there was anything less than a very difficult path into remotely influencing many, many cars, and it wasn't disclosed by now. As those systems evolved, the problem that happened here was we had a car network that's existed for a long time called a CAN, Car Area Network. And all these little microcomputers were plugged in this network. And when you'd step on the gas pedal, it sends a message to something to say, increase the throttle. It's no longer a wire, right?
Yep.
Then we plugged it into the internet. But they didn't design those things first. So we saw to be plugged into the internet, they didn't defend them from that kind of perspective. So we went through some years of like these attacks happening pretty frequently. Now the designs that are coming out have that in mind. And I don't want to say they're unhackable or, they'll never happen. But I think the risk cases are dramatically better than what they once were. And I mean, you can imagine the brand damage that 1 million cars just got turned off the road.
Yeah.
I think we're probably in good shape. Not saying that a single entity might not be able to be attacked, but on mass scale, I think it's pretty unlikely.
Yeah, that'd be pretty wild, right? If one day just like every Tesla autopilot got stuck at 100 miles an hour,
that would be a time to short the stock.
Yes. I agree. And I'm not wishing that this happens, by the way. I think it would be terrible, obviously.
Right.
But so you're working on a company right now called Phylum. You were a founder of this company. It's in the security space. One thing I'm like, I guess, generally skeptical of is, given what you said about almost everything being able to be hacked, like if you're building a company to prevent hacking, is it actually preventing hacking, or is it just like sort of helping?
Great question. Great question, and fair. The way we kind of look at it now is not about solving a binary state question of is it hackable or not. It's a function of how expensive can we make it? How difficult can we make it for an attacker, and how can we make it so they have to spend an incredible amount of resources where they're going to move on to something else first? And that's really the function of what modern information security is doing.
Yeah.
It's not realistic to make modern computers unhackable.
Yeah.
It is realistic to make it so difficult that most attackers will move on to other targets.
That makes a lot more sense. Okay. So it truly is like preventative, right? It's not, you're not saying like we can for sure stop this definitively 100%, right?
Anyone that says that is lying to you,
right? Yeah. Okay.
With you have a nation state actor, you have Russia after you, they're in.
Talk to the world about Phylum. what is the company? What are you doing? Who's your customer? How did this thing get started? I mean, curious about
Sure.
all of those things.
So we started Phylum in 2020 to solve the software supply chain security problem. And basically, modern software is not built by starting with an empty slate and then writing every line of code. You typically use these open source packages, which are kind of like Lego blocks, and you pick a configuration of them and stack them together. And you often get 20 to 70% of your application or the things you need to write the application by using these open source packages. And you kind of arrange how they're used and then interconnect them. And you can build software super rapidly with this. It is orders of magnitude faster than it used to be. The problem is these open source packages are written by anybody in the world. So everyone can contribute. And this is a great thing and a bad thing.
Mhm.
Because if you're an attacker, you can make open source packages that people think are good and trick them into using. So Phylum analyzes all of the open source packages and generates a risk score to then inform developers and security teams on the packages they're using so they can make better selections, defend their software appropriately to the threat model they're concerned with, and basically detect the bad actors before they get in. You could kind of squint at it and say we're building antivirus for software developers.
And how's that going? Did you guys bootstrap this company from the very beginning? Did you raise a little bit of money? Who'd you decide to do this with?
So I was working at another friend's startup. I was the CTO of this defense contractor kind of software company. And I ran into a friend, Aaron. He was on my team. And he came out of NSA's Tailored Access Operations group from years ago, which was like one of their real hitter teams. And he'd been thinking about this problem for a little while and told me about it. And his friend, Lewis, our other co-founder, we all got together. They actually ran into this issue working on a government contract and realized no one is solving this the right way. So we got together in 2020, right before the pandemic started, and decided to start a company and take a swing at solving this. And we raised a pre-seed round early in 2020, and then raised a seed at the end of 2020, and then an A in 2021, or early 2022. Yeah.
How much capital have you raised on this company so far?
About 20 million.
20 million buckaroos, and doing it through COVID. So obviously, like, either something's going wildly right or the investors that are investing in you are crazy. Which one is it?
I think things are going very right, and I think there's a lot of belief in the problem and the way we're approaching solving the problem. We've built an incredible solution for it, and working very hard to train customers on how to solve this and bring them to it, and it's going well. Challenging times with the market right now, but it's going well.
What's to start a company only, I guess, what's it been now? What year are we in? 23? So what has it been, 3 years roughly?
About 3 years, yeah.
So to start a company and go through a pandemic and raise $20 million, I mean, that seems like something is too good to be true here, right? Can you describe a day that you went to sleep and you felt amazing? You felt on top of the world. You're like, we're doing everything right. We're the best company ever. I'm the best founder ever.
Absolutely not. I've never felt that way.
Well, I'm sure this has happened at least once, right? Where you're feeling pretty good about things and you wake up the next morning and your day couldn't have been 180 degrees difference.
Absolutely. Okay. That happens quite a bit. I remember when one of our hallmarks is we have a completely automated malware detection capability. As these open source packages are released, we can scan them and identify malicious code in those packages in like under 10 minutes, which is, no one else can do it automated. And the fact we can do it that fast. So when we released this and we just started convicting tons of stuff. I was on cloud 9. Like, no one is even close to this. People are going to be buying this off the shelves left and right. It's going to be great. And there's been a bunch of days where it's like, does anyone care? Is anyone paying attention? Are we? And yes, they are. And no, they're not. It's one of those things where I think it's very easy as a founder to convince yourself, and I am definitely a prime candidate for this, to get very wound up on an idea and very excited on an idea and convinced it's going to be the silver bullet that makes everything easy.
Yeah.
And I think that's just a fallacy. Like, that's not a thing in a startup, right? Like, sure, there are things that make it better, but they make it 1% better. They don't make it 99% better. And the juxtaposition of that feeling and the realization, and I have to admit that that's happened more than once with me, where I do get very excited and I get really into something. I'll have a lot of belief, and then you learn to kind of try to average it a bit. At least that's a pursuit I have, because I know that's something that would probably make me better.
Yeah, you said something there that I'm going to write down. When you think about, you're a domain expert on security, information security, hacking, all these sort of things. When you think about, like, when you have these sort of ideas, because I agree, this happens with every founder. Most founders, when they're starting a company, they are some level of expert on whatever it is they're building, right? And a lot of times the co-founding team is the same. They have some level of expertise. And so you come with these ideas and you go, this one is for sure going to work. And too often we invest a lot of time and a lot of resources in building software before we ever test the market and actually know if this stuff works. So, like, what have you learned from that? What sort of recommendations would you give to an aspiring founder, or maybe somebody who's in the seat right now that's thinking about building their next thing? Like, what's the thought process that you need to go through now before spending a lot of time and energy on something?
My gut tells me I want to convince everyone who wants to be a founder to try to learn how to code to some degree, because it will let you invest your own time in building that micro proof of concept that you can then go talk to someone about before you go pull the course of your engineering team, current or future, into that idea. And I think that's been something that's been very helpful for us, as all of our co-founders are very, very strong software developers. So if we have an idea, I can go spend a weekend working on that before I bother everyone else with it.
Yep.
And I think that is you don't have to be amazing at software development, but learning enough to make your idea presentable to someone so they can get it. I think there's a lot of value to that. And I also think it's a lot easier than a lot of people think to learn enough to be dangerous with software development, especially now,
right? I don't know if you've caught wind of some of the recent headlines around ChatGPT and news
it's impossible to miss. There's just no way you could miss it at this point. Yeah.
On the last podcast, we talked about this engagement that a New York Times reporter got into with, now who we know as Sydney, which is the Bing, chatbot.
Yeah.
We won't necessarily talk about that, but I'm curious, like, ChatGPT and other AIs out there have gotten so good at writing code now that you can really tell it, like, here's an outcome that I'm trying to produce. And as long as you get the prompt right, or generally right, it can produce some code that's pretty close to like an end state. How do you feel about that?
So ChatGPT, I'm going to challenge that.
Okay.
ChatGPT does not produce good code. Now, that technology will get to a spot where it's going to be much better. They trained ChatGPT on such a big thing that also encompassed some source code that I think it can there are some simple things it can get right if you ask it a specific question. But that technology, a large language model extended on source code, will be helpful. for software developers, but I really think that ChatGPT and those extensions are really just going to turn into search engines, much, much, much better search engines. And if you're one great example for this is if I go learn a new programming language, I can ask it specific questions about how to do that in that programming language, and it can give me like decent responses. So there's a certain paradigm of doing something in one language, and then how do I do that in another? And it'll literally tell me, it doesn't really work that way. Check this out. This is how it works. Here's a code sample. And just that is massively helpful. I think I shouldn't say a year count, because the application of ML has absolutely hockey sticked.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to continue to see that. So maybe another year, maybe a couple, and we might have something more like, able to help quite a bit with that. But it's definitely a tool that's going to grow. I think ChatGPT was the Bitcoin of large language models, because it's the first one that everyone knows about now.
Yeah.
Right? And the amount, if you look at what OpenAI did, I saw some of the math on it. They released it free, so product-led growth. They got 100 million users, or 300 million
less
users.
than a month. Yeah,
and crazy. Then they said, hey, the paid version is this, and look at the revenue. It's so it's not going anywhere, right?
Yeah. So, do you believe that one day ChatGPT will replace software developers completely, or solutions like ChatGPT AI?
No. Not until we get true artificial general intelligence, but yeah, I don't think so.
So one day?
It's like saying everything could theoretically be hacked.
Okay.
Right? I'm not going to discount the possibility, but I don't think it's any time in our lifetime.
I think that there's a real case to be made, and maybe we're so early in this that our small brains can't understand what's to come, but it feels like a lot of the themes I'm hearing is that ChatGPT is not going to replace really anybody if you're an A or above in your skill set. Okay, so if you think about a copywriter, for example, ChatGPT, I can go tell it I have 7 ideas, go write me a full-length newsletter. I actually did this on my last newsletter.
Yeah, it's great at that.
Right? It's great at producing probably a B quality newsletter.
Mm-hmm.
Is it great at producing an A quality or an A plus? Not yet.
Right.
Could it be in the future? Sure. It's the same with code, right? It can produce lines of code. Is it A quality code? No, right? It's B minus, somewhere down here.
Yeah.
And so, as long as I think the output of what it's doing is consistent and or similar in the future, there's always going to be people that can use ChatGPT and other AI solutions to sort of create the magic, but those human beings are going to have to be sort of part of the equation for it to work.
Yeah, I think there's already a term that came out called prompt engineering.
Right.
Which is built around that whole, how do we, this thing can do tricks, but how do I pull strings around it to make it do the tricks I want, right?
Exactly.
And I think that there will be a lot of trivial tasks that will be just wiped off the map by stuff like this, which is great. There's gonna be some jobs affected, I'm sure, and that's maybe not the greatest, but it is an unfortunate inevitability. And hopefully we can find ways to train everyone to consume the resultant jobs that come out of that, because there will be a lot of that too.
Yep.
I know everyone, it's called AI, but I still think we're pretty far away from the AI of the movies, the artificial general intelligence, Terminators, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
The sentient, semi-sentient things. But the development of the machine learning space has blown my mind in the last 2 years. It's very exciting, and I'm excited to watch it continue to grow.
Yeah. Now, how is this sort of AI going to be used in hacking? Back to hacking.
There's a lot of discussion happening about that in the community right now, but it's nowhere near, not even close to where that would need to be it's helpful, but like a search engine, right?
Yeah.
But to unseat jobs or something, I don't see any evidence that'll happen even in the next 10 years. Maybe I'm wrong because it is hockey sticking up, but we're pretty far away from that right now.
As you think about the landscape of companies that are coming down the horizon of information security and similar, like, do you think this is a good space for a founder to be thinking about and potentially get into? Is it growing? Is it stagnant? Is it sort of going downhill? Like, I think there's a lot of hype about it. Is it here to stay? Is it going to be growing for?
It's absolutely exploding.
Yeah.
Now, in 2020, 2021, the funding that was going into cybersecurity startups was mind-boggling. There were lots and lots of companies that were coming out of stealth, pre-product, $30, $35, $40 million A's, pre-product, no customers, just on an idea. That's not sustainable, right? Like that doesn't fit any real model. And they're upside down. Unfortunately, I think most of those companies are pretty upside down right now. So there's part of this whole market shift back was a reasonable correction for cybersecurity, I think, to some degree. Obviously, a bit of an overcorrection, but it's a great. I always say, like, if you love that stuff and you're good at it, then yeah, it'll be awesome. There's a lot of problems to solve, and attackers they're not going anywhere. Ransomware came out several years ago. It is the most evolved method to extract money from a victim that is a target of a cyber attack. The attacker compromises and gets in. They want to extract money. Ransomware is the best technique to do it. We're going to continue to see that for a long time. Defending against the attacker, how they compromise something, the outcome of ransomware it'll take us decades to solve all that. Like, there's a lot of space for new companies to come help.
Yeah, it seems like a really hot space to be in. I have a friend that started a company called Emailage that was actually based here, that they did email security software and got really big and relatively sustainably. And so I know that, like, there's real demand, and that's a pretty niche thing, I think, that they were doing.
But it affects everyone, right? Like, that's
exactly. As you think about sort of you think about cybersecurity, I have a friend that used to work in the FBI for the U.S. government and was responsible for cyber attacks from specifically Asia that were coming into the U.S. Awesome. How big of a problem is cybersecurity when it relates to, like, our country being under attack, and what sort of things should we, be aware of that could potentially happen?
It's happening every second of every minute of every day, nonstop, and has been for years, and it'll never stop. It's free. You can launch attacks as much as you want. And it's also an equalizer to some degree. Like, a country like Iran, which is one of our, like, they have a strong cyber element. They're never going to fight the United States militarily, like on a battlefield. It'd be ridiculous. They can fight with cyber attacks because all you need is a stable of a bunch of smart people find the right thing they need to get, and they go get it. You can build a competent cyber operation on a national level for $100 million. You can't build a Navy for that, right? Like, so it is an equalizing force from a state security challenge, but it's not going anywhere. And we have two of my co-founders, and a significant portion of our team actually came out of the intelligence community, where they were focused on doing a whole bunch of secret squirrel stuff they can't really talk about, but they worked on those problems for decades, right? Like, that is there's a huge element of the cybersecurity industry that I don't even know about because they're all in the intelligence community. They're kind of firewalled off. And there's a lot of really dedicated people that are working to solve those problems, but got to think about our adversary. China has a lot too.
Yeah.
Russia has a lot. And it's not going anywhere. We're going to be seeing this for a long, long time. And there's a lot of initiatives in the government right now. I'm doing a webinar on one actually next week on something called the software bill of materials. It's this concept they're working on to try to help bolster the federal government from attack and make it easier to share information. But it's hard. Like, the government's very big. There's a lot of attack surface for an attacker to jump on. So this is going to be a challenge we go through for, I mean, it's not going away anytime soon, but we have an incredibly competent cyber capability in the United States. I've got to work with a good number of people directly affiliated with that and do some of that work myself. If we need to, there are gears that they can hit that no one else can. It is but we're not there yet, right? Like, I think, non-escalation is definitely part of the policy right now. We'll see if that changes.
Now, obviously we're talking about being on the defense here, but like, are we also on offense in a big way?
Oh yeah. We have an incredibly competent offensive. When I mean our cyber capability, I'm talking about our offensive capability.
Got it. So like, what kind of gears are we talking about here?
I wouldn't know. But
come on, Pete.
I know they have.
Something.
I shudder to think. I mean, look at there's an attack that's now been really, it's been understood that we built a specific attack to compromise a specific centrifuge in Iran to destabilize their nuclear weapons program by making this centrifuge explode.
Hold on. Say that again.
Yeah. This is, when did the news this come out? 2016, 2017, 2018, 2015? Maybe earlier. I might not be remembering. A U.S. state-sponsored group wrote a piece of malware that was disseminated that, targeted one specific thing. It was a centrifuge doing nuclear enrichment of, I believe, uranium. And they made it basically spin too fast, spin too slow. I don't remember the exact specifics, but the United States is not a slouch in this. In my opinion, I think they're probably the most competent in the world, and probably by a landslide. We don't use it that way right now. We're very careful with how we use our cyber capabilities, but if the gloves came off, I wouldn't be too worried.
Yeah, often, I mean, it seems like cyber probably would just lead to direct war, right? I mean, in a lot of cases.
There's a line that has to be balanced to say, what can we get away
with? How far
with?
can we go without,
right.
Nuclear war, other things happening?
And that line moves.
Yeah.
So it's a really interesting space to be in. It's frustrating because it's all government and bureaucratic and red tape and that kind of thing. But it's very, I'm always interested to pay attention to how it's evolving over time and watch what other actors do, because like as a security person in the United States, I can't go hack someone in Russia if they stole my Bitcoin or something, right?
Yeah.
If you live in Russia, they encourage you to go steal people's stuff. I want to say that passively that Russians are bad. I'm not saying that, but there are very different laws in some of our, some countries that are known for attacking United States elements, that change the calculus of it, right?
I want to talk a little bit about individuals that might be listening to this podcast, right? Like, what do we need to be aware of? What are basic things that humans can implement in their everyday lives to make sure that they don't get attacked in some way, shape, or form?
Use a password manager for everything, always. I have had some friends, quite a bit over the years, that would I'd get a call and say my Instagram got hacked, my Facebook got hacked. It didn't get hacked. Like Instagram, the application did not get hacked. Your password got compromised somehow.
Yep.
The typical way this happens is humans are terrible at remembering long lists of things. So we've come up with one good password and we reuse it in all sorts of different places. Instagram, bank, sign up to buy a new pair of shoes. Well, the shoe company got hacked. They had a crappy website. They dumped all the passwords, cracked them, found that password tied to that email address, and they sprayed the internet looking for what else they could get into, Instagram being one of them. Now they got your Instagram account. If you use a password manager that automates all this for you, every time you go to create a new account on a site, it says, let me make a password for you. Random characters, has nothing to do with anything else. So if someone compromises that website later, they learn a password that gives them access to nothing else in your field of view. And that is one of the simple, like that is the simplest thing everyone can go do right now. It'll take you 60 seconds. And just use a password manager for everything. It'll store everything for you. I use it to put I have a copy of my passport, a copy of my driver's license, birth certificate, vaccination records, everything. So if I go overseas, I lose my phone, I can get back into my password manager. I use one called 1Password. There's a number of them. And I have access to all my stuff, credit card information, passports, everything. But it also keeps all my passwords for accounts. So, something like if I buy something from a bad website and it gets popped, I definitely don't want that to affect Phylum, right?
Yep.
I want to Phylum. So we force, all of our team to use a password manager, and it's the easiest thing. That is an element that it kind of, I don't want to say it irks me, but people are like, oh, I got hacked. Like, no, you didn't. No one is coming after you. You used a website that got hacked, and someone found your password, and they sprayed the internet looking for what else they can do with it, and they found something. And that sucks, but it wouldn't happen if you used password manager. Easiest thing.
Or typically, can this truly happen to anybody, right? Or would anybody have any incentive to hack my account? I have 1,000 friends on Instagram, right? Like I'm not a very active person on there. So would anybody have any incentive to take on my account, or are they looking for people who have real reputations, are a lot bigger because they're trying to get the prize money out of doing it?
It depends on the motive. I think most people aren't targets, right? For what I call a directed attack. Like I want to go after that person specifically. Now, if you're Elon Musk, sure, right? He's celebrity, billionaire, whatever, so his accounts, I'm sure, are attacked all the time because he's a target. You and me, probably not. No. It happens very rarely, I think, but that's like when we talk about threat modeling of like, who are the attackers that might come after me? I've had roles before where it's a little more concerned traveling in certain areas because you might be on some lists because of some of the work we were doing. Now I think that's long past, and I'm a boring founder at a startup. I don't think anyone cares so much, but it's a great exercise to think about who would stand to gain, even if I don't if I don't think what I have is like super valuable to anyone, who might see that differently, or who might benefit if I were to go down in whatever followers or something, just as a thought exercise of threat modeling, who might be an attacker. Not something to ruminate about, I think, but it's an exercise for understanding, who might be an attacker for you.
That's probably an interesting exercise, not just for, we're talking about one example, which is Instagram or social media.
Right.
You talk about that across, access to an email, right? That's a whole other thing. Access to a bank account, access to, So that's really where the concern would be for, I think, an everyday person is like, well, if they do these more generalized attacks and they can see that you're consistently using the same password and they try that against a million websites
You got
and
it.
boom, Wells Fargo, they've got it.
Yep.
And now they have access to my funds. Like that's that's
And
what you have to lose, right?
if I have access to your email, can I get access to your cell phone provider account? Can I convince them to port your number to something else? So when you get like a 2-factor text, this happens all the time.
Yeah.
Coinbase did a really interesting study, and they checked that it's called account takeover. So that's like the technique or the name they put on it. How an account gets taken over by an attacker. And they found, like, I'm going to ballpark the numbers, but like 95% of them that got taken over had the SMS text, like text me a code, because attackers can call companies and convince them, hey, I'm so-and-so, I'm changing my number, change it to this one. So now when they go to log in, it sends it to their phone so they can type in the number and now they got you. And they have a bunch of techniques in that paper, but there's a whole world of people that are doing this constantly. And, I think that cryptocurrency is a really big part of this, because if you steal it, it's yours. Like whoever owns it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's be careful out there. Yeah.
Pete, thanks. I want to end with one question, which is standard for the show, which is what's one piece of advice you'd give for any aspiring entrepreneur that wants to start a company?
Get very good talking on the phone so you can do it constantly. Bounce your ideas off of absolutely everyone that will listen to you until they get sick of you, and then probably keep doing it, because that element I've seen it's something I wish I had earlier, and I've worked on developing, is working on the narrative, working on the pitch, honing that, bouncing this off ideas, and even before you start the company. But it'll, of course, obviously benefit you during the founding of it, fundraising, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I just met someone who has this really interesting native ability. Every time you tell them something, they spit it back at you. They reform their narrative. And he's an incredible storyteller. And everything he's doing is sculpting the narrative. And every piece of information I give him, he's sculpting the narrative. And you can watch it evolve in a conversation. It's really interesting to watch. And it's a skill I'm now hoping to adopt. And I think the earlier we get good at telling stories as a founder, before you're a founder, the better.
Amazing. Thank you. This is wildly entertaining. Appreciate you coming on the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for joining another episode of the Roller Coaster Podcast. It was a pleasure to have Pete on the show with us today and learn about all things hacking. The key takeaways from today's show were that every founder should learn how to code, at least know how to write some code. You don't have to be an expert, but having that skill set is incredibly valuable when starting a company. The second one is that don't worry, devs, ChatGPT is not going to replace you completely, but it is going to be able to do B- and B grade work. So make sure if you are in a field where ChatGPT can compete, make sure you're at the top of your game. Number 3, a very simple way to avoid being hacked from cyber attacks is just use a password manager. This is not hard stuff. It takes 60 seconds. It's very inexpensive. And this will avoid being hacked on things like Instagram, all the way up to your bank account. And so do this simple step. It'll help you in the long run. And number 4, if you're going to start a company, test your ideas against as many people as possible and collect that feedback and collect that data. That will become invaluable when you're starting. Thanks again for jumping on the roller coaster, and we'll see you on the next one. Please like and subscribe. Thanks.